My sister walks into dinner and calls the baby a fake in front of everyone. Bracelet sits under my fingers. My sister laughs and throws it back. Phone buzzes on the counter. The family group chat pings. My name is at the top, couch cushions creak when I sit. My sister says, "You always make everything about you." My sister-in-law sobs. Remote slides into old mail on the table. A neighbor later says she heard shouting. She writes down the time. Voicemail waits on my phone. The message runs 3 minutes. My sister calls the baby a product. Screenshot stares from my messages. Someone calls the new mother delusional. I print it. I print the discharge note. Discharge note sits stamped with the date and emergency C-section. The bracelet matches the name on it. A pharmacy receipt shows a refill date. Call log sits open on my laptop. It shows 3 missed calls from my brother the night she leaves. I write the times on a sticky folder. Rests on the table. I label it dates and slide papers inside. I type names into a timeline on my laptop. Voicemail plays louder in my kitchen. I send the recording to my cousin. She types, "This is bad." A neighbor brings a note. Envelope waits on the counter. I pack the screenshot, discharge note, bracelet, and logs into it. I lock the door and take the envelope. My fingers are cold when I turn the knob. The metal bites into my palm. I can hear my breath. I walk to the car and the gravel whispers under my shoes. I drive with the radio off. The streetlights smear the windshield. The wipers click in slow rhythm. My hands stay tight on the wheel. A red light blinks on an empty dashboard. I watch the glow until it fades. I stop at the side of the road and check the envelope again. The paper is thin and smells faintly of printer ink. I smooth the edges with my thumb. I say out loud, "Please be there." My voice is small. A crow caws once and flies past. The air tastes like wet asphalt. I fold my jacket tighter. Report sits on the detective's desk when I enter the station. The detective slides the report across. He says, "Your sister and the baby are gone." Desk holds the bracelet. It rings when I set it down. Paperwork spreads across the table. I push the printed discharge note forward. Form gets stamped and copied. A clerk fingerprints another document. They take my statement and my sister-in-law's voicemail. News thread lights my phone the next day. Someone posts the empty porch photo. Comments accuse me of the fight. A journalist calls. I give one line. Stack sits heavy at 2 in the morning on my kitchen table. I copy every log and receipt. I staple the screenshot to the discharge note. Email sits in my outbox to a reporter and a legal hotline. My reporter answers at dawn. She says, "This pattern looks wrong." I say, "Bring everything." Clinic file sits in my inbox the next morning. A nurse texts. She seemed scared. She agrees to confirm the discharge time in writing. Pile grows into a file I cannot lift with one hand. I hand it to the reporter in a coffee shop. She flips through and says, "This is tight." Call goes to the hospital records office. A clerk says the chart will take days. I ask them to flag it as a missing person. Subpoena sits stamped when the hearing starts. The judge signs the order for records. My hands shake as I take the copy. Recordings arrive at my lawyer's office 2 days later. The security tape shows my sister leaving the room at a specific minute. The call log shows my brother calling after. Editor holds the pile the next morning. The reporter says, "We publish tomorrow. Ready?" I breathe and fold the paper over. I set the bracelet on top. Shelter file sits on the worker's desk when we go there. She says she checked in 2 days ago asking for privacy. She slides an intake form across. Folder contains a simple intake form with a date stamp. The shelter worker pushes a folded note to me. It reads, "Tell them I left." I fold the bracelet into my palm. Bank statement sits under my lawyer's hand. It shows a withdrawal at 9:45 the night she disappears. The lawyer points at the timestamp. The shelter worker confirms she had cash. Flyer sits damp in my pocket the next morning. I sit on a park bench and hand out copies. My reporter sits beside me and hands me a photo. Photo rests in my hand. My sister-in-law's face looks small. I say, "Will she come back?" The reporter says, "We found her. They sheltered her." Paper sits folded in my palm. Records say when she left and when she came back. Small forms change the timeline. Small records make a case. Keep receipts. Keep records. My sister calls the police and posts that I faked my C-section while my baby is missing. Plate sits on the coffee table with my hospital bracelet on top. My sister sees it and laughs. Phone buzzes on my knee with the family group open. My sister posts, "She lied about the C-section." Reactions pop up. Bracelet twists on my wrist. I show it to them. My sister asks, "Where is the baby?" Note peeks from my bag with the clinic logo. I read postpartum recovery. My sister snatches the paper and says, "This could be fake." My brother watches. Voicemail blares from my phone. A neighbor leaves a 3:42 message saying, "I heard shouting and a baby crying." I replay it and write the time. Text shows the neighbor's voicemail forwarded to my sister. I ask, "You heard this too, right?" "No answer," Mom says. Maybe we're all tired. Wallet opens on the table, and I pull out a pediatric card. It has the baby's name and the next appointment. My sister grabs the card and says, "You could have made that up online." Call log sits on my screen with outgoing calls to the clinic at midnight. My brother sees my hands shake. He asks, "Why didn't you tell us?" I say, "I wanted privacy." Bag rests on the floor with a hospital bracelet inside. I drive to the clinic wearing it. The clerk prints a discharge page. It says I left April 5. I bring it home. Camera sits on the table as my sister photographs the discharge paper. She posts it with "C, fake." A cousin asks for proof of baby. Envelope sits on the counter with a stamped police form. At midnight, my sister calls 911. The officer asks, "Is anyone missing?" She says, "The daughter-in-law is making things up." He asks me where the baby is. Keys rattle in the officer's hand when he walks in. He looks at the bag and the bracelet. He asks me to step outside. Mom whispers, "Please calm down." Receipt sits folded in my pocket for newborn formula and a hospital prescription. I hand it to the officer. He says, "We need clinic records and the baby's health card." He calls the clinic. Notebook lies open on the officer's table, while the neighbor across the hall confirms the crying. The neighbor says, "I heard a baby all night." My sister stares at her. Police report sits on the desk as they take statements. The officer asks, "Do you have proof you gave birth?" I press the bracelet to my chest. I say, "Yes." Laptop sits open at the kitchen table and my brother types then deletes. He finally says, "I don't know what to think." The officer asks to check security footage. I nod. Watch ticks on my wrist as they put out a missing person alert. My sister posts, "If anyone sees her, tell the police." Neighbors whisper. Mom tells everyone to stay calm. Blanket rests on the passenger seat folded neat. I grab it and call my sister. Her phone goes to voicemail. I go back inside. Officers tell me they treat this as a missing child case. Notebook with a badge clipped sits on the table while they search the house. Mom answers questions. My brother watches the street. A detective reads what my sister told him. Recorder sits near the detective as he plays the neighbor's voicemail. He says, "This matches a crying infant at 2 a.m. My sister shakes her head. Clipboard holds a notarized request as they print my phone logs. The detective points to texts that confirm the baby's name. My sister stands mute. Stack of printed records sits under a lamp at 2 a.m. I spread discharge papers. I spread the clinic call logs. I play the neighbor voicemail and lay out the pediatric card and receipts. I print the family chat and highlight the laughing reactions. Stack of messages pops up in my inbox from a reporter who covers local crime. She says, "Send me what you have." I attach everything and hit send. I feel less alone. I drum my fingers on the table while I wait for replies. The lamp hums. The paper edges feel rough under my fingertips. I make copies. I write dates in block letters. Then I cross-check them. I write Step 1, photocopy. Step 2, timestamp. Step 3, lock originals in the safe. I follow each step. I put a clear label on the folder. I tape a seal. I press down hard until it sticks. I add a small line in my notebook. It reads, "Do not trust memory alone." I underline it twice. I fold the corner of the page for quick find. The paper creases softly. My breath fogs the lamp glass. I set a timer on my phone. I make a list of calls to return. I list names and numbers. I check them twice. Email, screenshot 7T48-2025 teen proofs. Timeline of outreach to clinic and clinic's confirmation envelope of subpoena papers slides under my door the next day. I open it and sit on the floor. My sister storms in and slams the door. She says, "You're trying to ruin us." I say, "I'm trying to find my child." Folder of medical files sits on the table when I meet the detective. He says, "We pulled the hospital footage." He shows a printout of me leaving with an infant. My sister looks pale. Ring of keys dangles from the detective's finger as the nurse arrives as a witness. The nurse says, "I handed the infant to the woman." She points to her signature on the log. My sister asks, "Why didn't she tell us sooner?" The nurse says, "She asked for privacy." Folder of evidence grows with each witness statement. A neighbor signs a note confirming the crying. The clinic sends a scanned discharge form. The social worker confirms they spoke to me. The family chat tone shifts. Envelope with a check arrives from a local charity offering help. The reporter posts an article quoting the nurse and the detective. The story clears some doubts. Relatives push back at my sister's posts. Flyer with the missing photo sits folded in my pocket 2 weeks later. I sit on a park bench at dawn with coffee. The reporter joins me. The baby is back with me now. The hospital bracelet is tucked in my coat. Keep records. Let facts speak. The hospital bracelet has my name and another baby's name taped over it in messy Sharpie. I stare and my hands shake. Phone sits on the kitchen counter with the family group chat open. My sister's name tops the list. Her message reads, "She deserves this." My mother is in the next room. I am 2 weeks home after an emergency C-section. They say they want to help. I sit at the table instead. Couch cushions sag where we argued. The baby sleeps in a crib against the wall. My sister crosses the room with a plate. She says, "You made it a show." I say, "She needs help, not gossip." My brother folds his arms and says nothing. The baby monitor clicks like a small alarm. Voicemail blinks with 3 missed messages. I press play. A neighbor asked, "I heard yelling at midnight. Are you okay?" I save that message. I check my phone for the discharge note photo I took. It is gone. I scroll the cloud and find a photo of a hospital badge that is not mine. The timestamps jump. One text from my sister says, "We told them the truth." I read it twice. Billing statement sits in an old email when I find it. It lists services for 2 different mothers on the same date. I screenshot the line item and print it. The print comes out uneven. The page shows my name and another medical record number. A cafeteria receipt is crumpled beside it. It says noon the day of the delivery. I write times on a sticky note and tape it to the lamp. I trace the sticky with a finger. The adhesive pulls the paper slightly. The lamplight is warm. I make a list of people to call. I mark hospital admin and records. I write follow up next to shelter. I breathe and then dial. The line clicks. A voice says, "Records can take 5 to 7 business days." I ask for a supervisor. They place me on hold. Music plays. It is thin and high. I tap my foot while I wait. The kitchen clock ticks loud. I rehearse what I will say to the supervisor. I write a short script on the back of an envelope. Need review now. Patient mix-up. I fold the paper and keep it in my palm. A pen rolls off the counter and clacks against the tile. I pick it up and press it into my notebook like a small anchor. Police report lands on my lap when a detective finally comes to my house. He pushes a stack of stamped forms toward me. The room smells like disinfectant and old coffee. He says, "We have statements that say you left in anger." I say, "I never left the nursery." He looks at his notes. He says, "This family is consistent." I thumb the hospital bracelet from my pocket. Folder of printed call logs sits on my kitchen table at 2 a.m. I sort them under the lamp. There is a 3-minute call marked dropped at 1:58 a.m. There is a 45-second call to my sister at 2:03 a.m. I tape a note with the times to my lamp. I print voicemail timestamps and the discharge summary. The discharge summary has a nurse's signature I do not know. The final page bears the other baby's name. I circle discrepancies with a red pen. I put them into a folder labeled "For Counsel." Phone pings with a reporter's message after I email a short note. She says, "Meet me tomorrow." I place 3 printed screenshots on the table. One shows a bank transfer to my sister labeled "Help with Care" the day before the delivery. One shows my sister asking for a copy of my discharge note. One is a voicemail where a nurse says, "We discharged the wrong patient." Court papers arrive and the judge's calendar gets mentioned like a threat. The detective asks me to come to the station. My mother cries in the hallway. My sister holds up her phone like proof. A neighbor testifies she heard fighting. The detective's pen taps. They book me for a preliminary interview and ask for medical records. The hospital sends a standard cover letter saying records are limited. One stamped word blurs. Recording plays at the station and the officer says, "You were recorded walking out." I say, "Show me." The recording is muffled. I hear my voice for 3 seconds. The rest is not me. I press my thumb to the bracelet in my pocket. Photograph slides across my lawyer's desk later. It is a security camera still. 2 women stand near the nursery at 2:05 a.m. One wears a scrub top with a name tag. The tag matches the nurse on the discharge form. The other woman matches my sister by height and hair. The reporter says she pulled the frame from a backup server. The camera angle does not show faces clearly, but it shows a bracelet exchange. I let out a small sound when I see it. It is like a breath and a sob at once. My lawyer asks if I want to go to the station now. I nod and stand. The floor is cold under my feet. Detective leans forward when the bank prints arrive. The bank shows repeat deposits to my sister. The memo lines read, "Care assistance" and "Word favor." The deposits start after my conflict with my sister. The detective asks, "Why would she get paid?" I say, "Ask her." Envelope from the hospital administration arrives at dawn with a call. They confirm a clerical error. They say they will open an internal review. I say, "Fix the record." The woman says, "We will investigate." Her voice stays formal. Folder opens in the records room when the hospital director walks us in. He hands a sealed envelope. Inside is an amended transfer log. It lists a manual correction and an initial I do not recognize. It also lists temporary custody transfer for observation. The detective reads it twice. I say, "I didn't sign that." The director looks away. He says, "It was standard procedure." I run my thumb over the ink. It feels dry and flat. The paper crackles when I fold it open. I tell the detective to mark every page. He nods. He asks me to list witnesses. I do. I say the nurse who came in night shift. I say the technician who pushed the cart. He writes it down. He says, We will subpoena them. A clerk in the records room hums while she stamps forms. The sound is steady. Photograph of a cafeteria receipt appears when the reporter texts. She found it in the staff break room. It shows an employee meal bought at 2:30 a.m. The staff card name matches the nurse who signed the discharge summary. A logbook entry near it bears a smudge. The smudge looks like erasure, the reporter says. They tried to hide a transfer. File folder sits on my kitchen table weeks later. The director resigns the next day. The nurse who signed the discharge takes leave. My sister deletes some social posts and disables her account. The police reopen missing person angles. A detective calls and asks new questions. The tone changes. Photo of my mother and the baby sits in my wallet. I carry it to a noon press statement. The reporter records my short statement. I read about errors, discrepancies, and a call for a proper investigation. Cameras blink outside. A neighbor whispers, "I always wondered." The public reads and judges. Envelope with a small settlement check arrives later. It is from the Hospital Foundation for Emotional Distress. I cash it. I use part for childcare. I give the rest to a patient advocacy group. The check is a symbol, not a fix. I keep a ledger of expenses. I write each date and amount by hand. I tuck receipts into envelopes labeled medical, legal, and childcare. I make copies of the copies. I breathe through it. I remind myself to sleep. Flyer folded in my pocket softens from the rain months later. I walk to the park with the baby asleep at my chest. My mother walks beside me. A neighbor nods. The reporter texts, "Front page tomorrow." I fold the flyer again and tuck it into my back pocket. Phone shows a new message from the detective. He says, "We keep the investigation open." The reporter says, "We will run the piece when you say go." My sister calls twice that week. I do not pick up. Folder stays in my bag. The photograph stays in my wallet. The hotline card stays on the fridge. The record is corrected. The world is not fixed. People I thought were allies said nothing. People I barely knew spoke up. I rock the baby at night. The room light is low. The monitor glows a soft green. I whisper the facts to myself. I tell the child the truth in small pieces. I tell her name, date, place. I tell her we kept records. I kiss her forehead. It is warm. Keep the paper. The nights go slower, now. I count the breaths between feedings. The house makes small noises. Pipes ping, the fridge hums. I write what I remember in a notebook. I date each page. I press my pen hard. The ink leaves an impression. I rehearse what to say if someone asks. I practice calm sentences. I practice the steps I took. Step 1. Collect proof. Step 2. Call the police. Step 3. Contact the reporter. I repeat them like a prayer. A neighbor brings over soup one evening. She sets the bowl down and watches the baby sleep. She says, "You did the right thing." Her voice is low. I nod. Her hand is warm on my shoulder. The detective calls once a week. He gives small updates. He never promises outcomes. He says, "We are following leads." I say, "Thank you." I hang up with the phone still warm in my hand. At night, I check the hospital log again. I check timestamps, I check names. I check the bracelet. I trace letters with my finger until the ink blurs. I do not let go. I tuck the bracelet in the drawer and lock it. I sleep a little. I wake and write more. I keep the paper. One morning, I unseal an envelope and find a typed apology from the hospital. It says they regret the distress. I read the line twice. It feels like an address and not an action. I fold the letter and place it with the receipts. In the kitchen drawer, I keep a small list of next steps. I ask for full audit, contact oversight board, get counselor for baby. I cross off the one about suing. Not yet. A neighbor who once avoided me now brings baby clothes. She says, "I was wrong." I say, "Thank you." The clothes smell of shampoo. I fold them and put them in the drawer with the bracelet. At times, I still check the group chat. I scroll and stop at my sister's old posts. I read the comments. Some are cruel, some are doubtful. I close the phone and take a breath. I whisper to the baby, "We kept the paper," and she smiles in her sleep. Some nights I turn the pages slowly. I relive each timestamp like a map. I touch each receipt, like a bead on a string. I take a photo of each page and back it up in 2 places. I name the folders clearly. I write the date on the file name. I breathe between each one. I tell myself the steps matter. I tell myself the truth has weight. I sleep a little deeper.